My second guest tonight, as I mentioned before, is me, Dick Cavett, co-author of a book called Cavett. I have foolishly agreed to be interviewed by three writers of note, and the three writers of note are sitting near me now. Anthony Burgess has published 30 books, including A Clockwork Orange and his most recent one, Napoleon Symphony. He is one of those exceptional people that talk show hosts give thanks for, an author who talks as entertainingly as he writes. Barbra, whose book about the intertwinings of power and sex and society in Washington, D.C. and her own life and the role she played therein, laughing all the way, stayed on the bestseller list for 14 weeks. She's working on a new novel, a work of fiction this time, but all kinds of people are worried that they're going to be recognizable in it. Rumor has it that she has gotten a 6-figure advance from her publisher. If you read her book, you know that when she isn't getting advances, she's making them. Little joke, Barbra. Jerzy Kosiński has written, seriously, folks, 4 novels, including The Painted Bird and his latest, The Devil Tree. He won the National Book Award in 1969, and it's always a little painful to admit that someone can write that brilliantly in English when it isn't his native language. He, too, is a dazzling conversationalist, storyteller, remembered for 2 stories he told on this show, one about a uniform and one involving Eskimos, but we won't go into those now. I'm a little worried about a quote I ran across somewhere. Anthony, maybe you can identify it for me. Let mine enemy but write a book, or some words to that effect. In other words, people really get at you when you've written.
It's in the Bible somewhere. It's in the...
Could it be Job?
I think it's the book of Ecclesiastes, isn't it? Oh, that mine enemy had written a book.
Had written a book.
Yeah, that's right.
Really? Yeah. I didn't realize it was that old, but...
No, it's pretty old, but it's true. Anyway, about your book, congratulations and welcome to the ranks of authors. It's your first book. Is it going to be your last book?
I don't know. Shouldn't that be up to others to decide, or how do you decide?
No, that's the point. That I like this book very much. It's a book about you, but I'm speaking for myself only, can't write about myself. I can only invent people. Of course, I pour something of myself into these invented characters, but I'd be extremely embarrassed to have to write a book about myself. And I admired that for a start, the fact that you were able to be candid about yourself, to be exposed to a very large, much larger public indeed, than the public you're exposed to normally here on television, because this is a public that runs through time, you know what I mean? You're exposed for a brief segment of time here, but now you're exposed for time that goes, what I believe is called diachronic time. This is synchronic time. You're going to be exposed to diachronic time, time running through. This book will be in libraries, this book will be there. Even if the book disappears, the book will have been written and will suddenly reappear.
That's a frightening thought. I'm going to try to withdraw the thing right now.
But it's true. It's the first thing one has to worry about. One has committed something to posterity.
And someone can go back and reread it. Whereas on television, you make a fool of yourself, you say, I'm so sorry, and it's gone. Whereas in a book, it's always there.
That's right. Does that worry you, Jerzy? When you've written, do you think they're going to read it through the ages? And
No, that doesn't worry me. What worries me is that you can't withdraw the book while you're still alive.
Right.
Not the ages, but in your case, it's too late now. With the show, you don't have to show the tape again. But with this, this will haunt you in a sense that you cannot go to every library and say, don't show it to anyone. I mean, that is real, in a way.
This is becoming a very unpleasant experience.
That has happened, Dick. You know, George Orwell, a British writer, I think a very good British writer, too, Animal Farm, 1984 and so forth. He wrote a book called A Clergyman's Daughter, and he regretted having published it, and he spent a great deal of his life, to my knowledge, going round bookshops all over London and in the provinces, too, looking for copies of this book so he could buy them up and then burn them.
Really?
Of course, he could, when he died, the whole thing was outside his control, and the thing is there in paperback now. But
did his going around buying them put him on the bestseller list and create a greater demand?
No, he just regretted having written the book, and I can well understand this. I regret myself having written certain books.
But I also think that if you really think about being a host of a talk show, you have an ideal situation in a way. Now you have the fame, which is in a way reinforced from week to week.
Yeah.
Once in a while, from day to day, month to month. You reach the bedrooms, so to speak, of your audience. So you have the fame.
Yeah.
You are well paid. You have the audience which is waiting for you there, no matter what. They are there, and they don't, in a state of expectation. They don't know what is going to be on the show. They may know the names of those of us who appear on it, but they don't, unlike in a film, where they could have learned about the film from the reviews from other people, it's always the state of expectation. You are the star of your own 2-hour film every night. You select your supporting staff, supporting actors. It's an ideal situation in a way. This is something which is of an entirely different caliber. Here you reveal something which is where you take enormous chance. You cannot, as I said, modify it. With the show you can, from week to week, from week to week. You can change the image. You can bring different guests. You mentioned before that your guests numbered from 4,000 to 5,000, and indeed, they are all extremely prominent people, charismatic figures. They add to your charisma. This, I find, an extremely honest book, in a way that many things in the book are things we would not suspect about you, and that is very brave about it.
Well, see, that's the thing that's startling. When you write a thing, you have no idea what it is that people think you are, to begin with, and then you have no idea what it is they'll be surprised at about you what surprised you? I mean, it seems to me that I am myself here, and people who've had a look at that have said, gee, I really didn't know you, or other people say that.
I think almost everything about, since one assumes that one knows the man who is in one's bedroom so often.
Well, that certainly blows the myth that they tell.
Sure blows many myths, doesn't
Exactly.
No, let me say a little about something that surprised me and pleased me, and that I never realized before, and I've been watching your show ever since it began, off and on.
Gee.
I never realized how seriously you took this whole business. You're relaxed, the whole atmosphere is informal, and of course this is the aim, it's the art to conceal art. It looks like an informal talk show. In fact, your approach to the whole business is highly professional, and this came out not only in the description of the way you work and the immense tensions you undergo before you appear on the show. For instance, you don't know this, ladies and gentlemen, but he has to go, may I use this word? No, he has to micturate or urinate before he goes on, and again he has to do it, and this is true, it's down there.
Well, I know it's down there, but to say it on television...
Here is the interesting thing. You're very concerned about what I used to be concerned about, and still am in a sense, about the whole mystery of the comic entertainer. You have heroes like Groucho Marx.
Yes.
And a very great hero of mine, too, a fellow countryman, a fellow Lancastrian, Stan Laurel. I was very, very moved by the tributes you paid to Stan Laurel in your book. You rightly said that Chaplin and he came over on the same boat from England to America. Chaplin never acknowledges the existence of Laurel in his autobiography.
That's right. In 400 pages, there wasn't room to mention Laurel.
But this is the sort of thing I mean. You are interested in these people. You're fascinated by their techniques, by the way they work. And I thought a great deal. I won't speak my thoughts aloud for the moment. I thought a great deal about the summations you made about the whole art of comic entertainment in that book. This was highly professional.
There's also, you were talking about two different kinds of writing here.
Barbara, forgive me. We brought you here to talk, but not incessantly. I'm kidding. We have a commercial. That's why I'm interrupting you. We'll be right back. Stay where you are. Do you find in writing, even those of you who write fiction, which you say even then you do reveal something about yourself, that you cringe at the reaction of, gee, I'd rather not have known that about you?
Yes.
From readers?
But people always think that a novel is a kind of autobiography. I wrote a series of novels about a fat, constipated poet who wrote his poems in the lavatory and made ghastly stews for himself, was sexually impotent, and this has always been identified with me. I can assure you it's not really an identification at all. Whereas it's an invention. It's a total invention. But, we're committing this cardinal sin of getting away from the object, aren't we? Getting away from your book. Can I ask you something else about this, a bigger love affair than a love affair with writing, or with this kind of new hybrid, which is not quite entertainment, not quite instruction, not quite anything, and the stage itself? I get a feeling from this book that you have a deep passion for the stage. Is this true?
For appearing on it or for seeing
it? No, for the whole process, for the whole dramatic process, and especially for professional comedy.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. You were an actor. You played the part of Ragueneau once in Cyrano de Bergerac, didn't you?
That's right, in a musical version of all things.
I know well, yeah. Am I right in supposing this is the central passion?
It is. I sort of quelled it, I guess, but I know that as a kid, I fell in love with the idea of being in theater. I remember standing backstage once at a junior high school stage, and there was no one around. I just happened to wander in there, and there were the curtains and the flies and the lights and the sandbags, and I just thought, I want this to be my life in some corny way, like in a corny movie. And I've acted and so on. But yeah, there is some abiding affection for it, but I suppose you'd have to say it's unfulfilled.
If
really.
one of us here wrote a play for you, would you be prepared to act in it?
Not after the description you just gave of your character.
No,
in the
I've finished with that character. Think of a new one. Will you act in it?
Sure, try me. I don't know how good I am. I was kind of funny in comedies, as a light comedy in summer stock. My wife points out, however, that when I had to act serious things, I made people laugh, which was not wanted. It's a little embarrassing during the death scene to hear snickering in the audience and cat calls and yeah.
If the television somehow would end for you, suddenly, as a result of the book, let's say, what would you do then?
If television would end for me?
Yes, what would you do then?
I don't know. You see, partly I've never had a plan for my life. That's what makes me hard to figure out
That's right.
about
The book
myself.
doesn't go into the future.
I don't.
You don't speculate about. Do you see yourself as an old man, old constipated author?
No, I don't.
But one day it's going to happen, though.
Yeah, I know, but I've never had this plan. I've always felt that I was like the ball in a pinball machine that sort of went on a logical route, but only after you looked at it afterwards. I hadn't really planned it. I don't know how I got here, except when I look back over it, it seems to be logical, but it was not my plan.
This tells how you got here.
I'm a rudderless ship.
But
He's just a slip of a boy.
Yes, but what about the future, though? How this, again, it tells a lot about the past and a lot about the present. Hardly anything about the future.
I can't
And
deal
yet
with
that
it. I can't deal with the
Marvel one
future.
day will change. Now, how do you see yourself?
I don't know. Does it make me sick that I can't answer that? Am I weird? Am I strange?
How old are you, Dick? How old are you?
I don't know.
No, tell me. Come on, how old are you?
What do you prefer?
The truth.
37.
That is your age?
Yeah.
Oh, you're young. Oh, my God, it's marvelous.
And you have been telling me how much an older woman I am than you, and it's not that bad.
It isn't?
Give me the book.
It's not. Well, what's a gap of 20 years? I mean, I know.
Which way? Good fellow.
What did you dislike about me in the book, Barbara?
I didn't dislike anything. I
Well, that's
wanted to
the-
come on
I
here
don't-
and rip you up. I
wish you
really
would.
have had a great desire to get at you since you told me when I said you make
I-
older women look good like Betty Davis and Katharine Hepburn. He said, I'm not a plastic surgeon. I can do nothing with you. But I liked the book.
I said that to you?
Yes, on the air.
That's awful.
I like the book. There's no way to get around the fact that it is a good, fun book. And I disagree with Jerzy. I think he's precisely the same in the book as he is on the air, as he is in person.
Oh, yes, but what about
Boring.
years from now? Because, look, there's something very interesting. Now, you have on this show,
Why are you pursuing this thing about the future?
because you are confronting people here on the show who, in many ways, very often, are you 20 years from now. Old actors, past politicians, people who are brilliant, beautiful, accomplished, famous. And you get them on the show and you dissect them. I don't want to use names because very
Cruelly?
often they collapse on your show. One man died on your show, Cavett. He actually died. Now,
That's true.
Yet there's no future.
You're not blaming me, however,
No,
I hope.
no. But that may be another book, since you are very articulate. This is a very articulate book. You live in a very articulate environment. Your wife, who's an accomplished actress, writes just as well. I remember her profile of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton in Time magazine.
Well, I wrote to her and told her she must write a book, yes.
Yes, you're getting a fan letter from you. Made her
I
day.
look forward to that.
Here you are, so to speak, on the top of that mountain now, and you get the guests who used to be on the top of the mountain. Do you see yourself? And maybe that it should follow somehow. Maybe as a fiction. Project yourself into that future. It will come very quickly. I mean,
Very
few
hard.
commercials. and it's
Apparently, I
there.
can't deal with the future. I don't know.
Jerzy, who wants to deal with the future? And I think the whole book is nothing but a very ambitious young man with a sense of humor that hides his insecurities who wants peace. And I think he has to get off this set to
Well,
find
I
peace.
say,
don't mean to
I say
write
my
your
last
sequel.
thing. I say, at the age of 37, he's finished one segment of his life.
Precisely.
And now a new segment must begin.
Oh, that's-
That's part of the reason for writing, isn't it? You can get that over with, and then now you can move on.
30.
To what?
Yes, David.
well, that's the point again.
Perhaps a talent scout is watching. We'll be back after this message.
I want to ask you. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say I invite you to treat me as your guest.
You are the object at the moment.
I begin to feel that.
You're going to be dissected. I want to ask you a very fundamental question.
Yeah.
Before I ask it, I'm going to answer it myself, in my own terms. This is this. People have asked me why you write books. My answer is I write books for a living because there's no other job I can do successfully or with any measure of expertise. Obviously, you have another kind of living. Therefore, why did you write this book? You
That's
didn't write
cool.
this book for money, did you?
No. In fact, I've been told there's no money in books. by
There is no
people.
money in books. That's quite so.
Well, that in itself would explode a myth, I'd think, for most people who must think, hey, so-and-so's on the bestseller list, you must be raking it in.
No, that's true. I think Barbra would say something very apposite about that.
If she were here, she would.
Well, yes, Barbra is here. No, but nobody writes books, I think, with the intention of becoming rich overnight. The person who believes he's going to write a bestseller and be famous and wealthy forever is very rare. I write books, probably my two friends here write books because it's a trade. It's a trade we can carry out more or less successfully. We are happy to have made a thing. The only moment of joy we have is that moment when the proof copy comes, you know, when it's between you and the printer, more or less. After that, the thing is launched, it's somebody else's concern. But back to this question, why did you write this book?
I seem to have evaded your question.
You do indeed.
Partly there's a practical reason. Publishers constantly ask me, because you're on television, you ought to write a book, and I thought, well, maybe there's something to that, but I have no idea how. But I guess I wanted the experience of knowing what it is like to get something down the way you want it, rather than the frustration of when you're on television. Everything is sort of off the top of your head. It's ad lib. It's about the way you wanted it, sometimes better than you thought, sometimes worse, never quite the way you planned. And I somehow envied writers the idea that you can get a thing and finish it the way you want it and then pass it on. And then also to put an end to a certain irritating number of repeated questions year after year about myself that people constantly ask. I thought, well, maybe this will stop that now and I can move on to something else.
Sort of to set the record straight.
Is that the answer you
that's
wanted?
Part of it, but there was another answer I thought you might give. We all know, and it's repeated in the book, that you are one of the few people alive, perhaps the only person alive, who has read all of Henry James's novels.
Well, that's a terrible thing to know about anybody. In fact,
there
may be some I missed. I think that may have been exaggerated by a journalist.
Well, but you admitted in this book. The point is that I have a feeling that you have a literary ambition.
Really?
And that this talk show business is a kind of, what's the French, a pis-aller. It's a second best. But your real ambition is to use words in some permanent form. And this is a shy attempt at showing yourself to be a literary practitioner.
Exactly,
Am I right?
Anthony. He has a very nice command of the English language, and you've got a romance going with it, whether you know it or not.
Ain't it the truth?
It sure am.
Yeah.
I want to take Anthony's question a step further. Why, when you have made your career in television and you have had a reputation for being a cold cucumber and not exposing much of yourself, people say, oh, Cavett doesn't go into his own feelings.
Can't
and
get
then
off that word,
all of a
can you,
sudden,
Barbra? Exposing.
Exposing. Well,
Good.
Then all of a sudden you're writing a book which is really very revealing. I mean, the jump between... I mean, do you really feel that you might have let ABC down because you didn't expose yourself on the air? There it goes again. And then for Harcourt Brace, you've just let it all show.
I never thought how I would write the thing. Porterfield came up with a way of writing it, which I could never have come up with. And I know him to be an organized and talented person, and I thought, well, it would be good to work with him on something, and it would be about me, and which, of course, is a fascinating subject to me. As Noel Coward once said, I find the subject endlessly fascinating or something. But I don't know. I guess I can't quite answer that, except that once you get going, the only way to do it is to open it up. And the myth of it's very hard to be honest about yourself, it turns out to not be so true. In fact, in a way, it's kind of sickeningly exhilarating.
You are interested in words, right? You are concerned about words.
Yeah.
You're the only person on this kind of business who is concerned about words. Most of the talk show pundits one sees, that thin man with a fat jackal, I forget their names, and the rest of them, Vermin Griffin, or some such name, these other people. They're full of expletives, they're full of songs like yeah, and I guess so, and wow.
Sounds like the White House tapes.
But
and they're all very good friends.
This show is the only show that I know of, the only popular show I know of that is built on language. Am I right in saying that? That it's your aim to build this thing on language?
No, you're wrong. It's not my aim. It may have accidentally happened that my obsession with words has come out or something, but I don't. It's not an aim. In fact, I've never had any real aim. But I would like to hear you comment on this. You said you could never write a book that's very personal.
No.
I suggest that maybe you'd find it sickeningly easy to do so, because haven't we all had the experience of spilling our guts to a stranger on a train or in a sidewalk cafe? Or am I the only one?
As we sit here, yes.
No.
You know, it's easy to
It's
tell
not the
strangers
same,
the most intimate
No,
things about yourself.
Candor, true candor is very rare. It's a very rare quality. And I toyed with the idea recently, being now 57 years of age, of starting to write my autobiography.
Would you say truth is blue?
Truth is a kind of glue. It's other things too. And I thought, well, now my first sexual experiences, it's a great temptation to antedate them for a start and say that I lost my virginity at the age of 12, which is not true. I lost it at the age of 15, which again is not true. You know what I mean? It's this... see, there are two kinds of writers. I think Jerzy is one of the... Jerzy is my kind of writer. He's a liar. A constitutional liar. And you see, writing novels is lying. It's telling lies. Now, Dick's book tells no lies, as far as I can say. It doesn't sound as though it tells lies.
Didn't Mark Twain say you've got to lie in order to tell the truth? And I know that in your book, at some point, you had to rough over the truth in order to get the truth out, which is very ambiguous.
The whole center of this show always was to get at our truth. That's why you really took so many chances. This is the only show I can think of where Dick would actually bring one man to fill the whole show. Mm-hmm. Now that's taking terrible chance on someone's ability to tell the truth or to lie. And I think when I read this, I had a feeling that what you are doing really is in a way giving it back to us. And
that rings
opening
a bell
yourself
in some
the way
way.
you open us on the show.
Maybe I feel I
true or not?
have assumed that people should come here and spill their guts, so to speak.
In very difficult circumstances, in which very often you would ask a man a question he would not be able to answer, and so forth and so forth.
And I have felt guilty about things I've asked
Dick.
people.
It's not that we don't want you here to talk, but we have to take a commercial break. We'll be right back in just a minute.
Dick, can I ask you this question? Did you write this book?
How do you mean that?
Did you sit down at a table with a typewriter and hammer it out?
That's a fascinating question, as it turns out, because yes, it is a written book.
Is it all written by you?
And some of it is in dialogue form. Mm-hmm. But Porterfield and I actually passed paper back and forth, or in some cases mailed it from town to town with questions and answers.
Was there ever any business of getting this onto tape and then having it transcribed?
No. Once we didn't want to be interrupted, and we put on a tape recorder and went in a car for a while, but the tape recorder didn't work. It was only a little Sony.
So you've actually this may seem to be of no great interest, but it's fundamental. The process of writing a book is not just waiting for the muse to descend and then suddenly finding the words emerging from the tips of your fingers. It's an agonizing business. I said in one of my own books once that the writer's craft leads to addiction of various forms. It leads to addiction as far as tobacco and caffeine are concerned. It leads to constipation, impotence, diarrhea, not at the same time as the constipation, but alternatively. It's an unhealthy life. It's a very unhealthy life, sitting down, crouched over a typewriter. And have you had this experience of knowing what it's like? Have you crouched over the typewriter day after day with this work, typing it out?
Yeah, I had an experience of getting a kind of high from sitting at the typewriter at times, and then afterwards a kind of fatigue that wasn't like anything I'd ever had from performing. And I don't know, it was a little like that, but not the same, and a slightly unhealthy feeling of, is this good for you to sit down and go through this kind of nervous anxiety?
Well, it's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, it's better than a good show.
It never goes well.
I don't know.
Sometimes you can feel it.
Do you feel you're playing to an audience when you write? Do you hear?
Well, you feel there's somebody over your shoulder.
Yeah.
The reader over your shoulder is there. And this produces very strange effects. I'm a bad writer, an unprofessional writer, in that I never keep a carbon copy. I just type the thing there on one sheet. Because when there's a carbon and another piece of paper under the carbon, I feel that that piece of paper is watching me. I feel that I'm being watched from two angles, and the copy is an intrusion on my own privacy.
I know that feeling. That's very strange, because if the carbon is in there, it also seems to imply that this is going to be permanent, because we're going to keep one copy here and one here. And you don't have quite the freedom to just fool around and maybe throw... It's easy to throw one sheet away, but hard to throw two away.
So you wrote with a carbon?
No, I didn't.
You just wrote one sheet?
I didn't, yeah. I didn't realize until now why that was, but it's very...
It's obvious he wrote. The sections that he wrote, with all apologies to Mr. Porterfield, the sections where you've actually written yourself sound like you, and they're the best parts of the book. Your own
anything that's by me
is the best part of the book.
Is by me.
That's right, and I can tell that it's not with a tape recorder. It's obviously typewritten.
You can, because some people think it's spoken.
I don't think so, because I've talked to you enough to know that it's really the way your mind works.
How many words a day did you write?
I'm apparently very fast.
Yes.
Porterfield, who's been a professional writer all of his professional life, was rather startled at the speed at which I write. And when I used to write gags for comics, I talk about in the book, I could write so fast that it seemed like I was just copying something that had already been written.
Yeah.
But it was exhausting, and the feeling of having filled a page that fast took a great deal out of me.
How many words a day?
Gee, I don't think I could answer that,
No,
but I often filled...
It's the kind of question that a writer will ask, isn't it, sometimes? Because I've been up against it in my time, still am, I suppose. But in the year when I thought I was going to die, I was supposed to have 1 year left to live. I wrote 5 novels in that year, 5.5 novels in that year. And this was very much a matter of knowing how much one could get down on the page daily. I found I could, if I could write 3,000 words a day, that meant in a month I could write 90,000 words. In other words, I could write a novel, by American standards, a fairly short novel, 90,000 words, which is about, yours is about, what, 100,000?
I don't know.
It's about 85,000.
I don't know. I'm too...
No, in a month.
No,
No,
it is.
did you have that sensation of time pressing on you when you were writing it?
I feel that as an assignment, and I have to get it over with. That's really what I felt. It was like being in school. I had an obnoxious habit in school of... my roommates hated me for this. This may be in the book. Forgive me. It's hard. I haven't read the thing in months. But when I was assigned a paper in college, I would go right home and write it before I could eat, before I could take a nap. And I would finish it and type it up and put it in the drawer, and my roommates wanted to hit me for this. But it was out of a kind of fear. It's an assignment. I've got to get it over with. It isn't any kind of discipline or Prussian upbringing, but I don't know what that is. It was like an assignment, and I couldn't...
Right.
There's a guilt feeling that you have
Right,
until you get
right.
your daily assignment over with. I don't know.
Now that the book is out, what about the reviews? Are you going to worry about it? If the reviewers will pan the book?
No, I have a strange streak in me that doesn't mind being panned. Maybe it will affect me differently in print. Maybe it'll hurt to have a book panned, where it doesn't hurt me to have a show panned. I mean, I've been on so much, and people have disliked and liked so many things that I've done, and, you know, that I'm numb to it now.
All right,
Someone
now-
said you develop a callus. Actually, though, that may be like attacking a member of your family. If
What would you prefer if those who are going to write about the book will say that they prefer the Cavett of the show to the Cavett who committed this book? Or should they say he should really do what Burgess says, sit down and write and forget his show? If it's going to be that sort of... Since obviously there are two different personalities involved. One is the show, which is different, a different mixture of things, and this is entirely different
The
man.
essential thing is that they review the book. I mean, basically, what difference does it make what reviewers say? It's the American
But they're
people,
writers
it's the
in their
book
own right.
buyers
But-
that you
Well,
want to get to, that you want to give your story to.
you
Not
can't
what-
be utterly
Well,
contemptuous.
I don't know why we have to suffer reviews. Reviews don't sell books.
Precisely.
Reviews don't sell books in any country. I've never been a bestseller.
But reviewers are men like you
and
and
I've had
you
big
and
reviews.
Dick.
Yeah.
There are some people in England that I know of who never get reviewed at all. They never get a single review for one of their books, but they sell.
Now, would that bother you?
I don't know. The thing that might bother me, though, that you raised was, well, it would bother you if the guy writes in such a way that you respect him and he didn't like you, then it hurts. I suppose that's partly if a reviewer, the man or woman who reviews you, if they seem to be good and intelligent and somehow perceptive, and yet they hate you, which has happened to me, you don't like that. But
Intellectual cult that somebody's sitting down and maybe you'll make the back page of the Times and maybe you won't make it at all. It really doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you've poured a lot of you into that and it goes out there. And the in-between person who is the reviewer, to me, isn't worth a rat's whatever.
really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm so interested to hear that. But what frightens me in what he says is, if the same me that you see here is not the one in the book, where does this one come from?
Well, that's what we want to know.
And now I'm going to remove this mask and see who I
But that's
really
what you did
am.
in the book. You removed the mask, and you did something that is almost un-American by our repressed standards we've grown up with. We're not supposed to admit we're ambitious. We're not supposed to admit that we want to be famous and that people are going to stop us on the streets and that we'll have money. And you do it all the way
Well,
through
I
that
did.
book.
At
the same time, he did
people
something
don't
opposite.
do that, and you do it, and it works.
There's one
But-
difference, however. He already is famous. He
But
didn't
he
have to write
says,
the book.
no, he didn't write the book for fame, but he goes all through his childhood and he says, I'd watch these comedians, I'd see these magicians, and I think, oh, I want to be special. I mean, in another way, people go into shopping centers and shoot political candidates to get attention. Everybody has that in them, and so few of us will recognize it, will admit to it, will bring it out in the open and talk about it, and you did it well
It's
in
a
this
strange
book.
thing. I find this
Kiss me.
to be a book of a book of a man whom I would never imagine to run a show like that. A man who would perhaps be after all these things, and yet extremely trembling man, insecure in a way. I mean, a man who's always looking for something and never sitting here in a seat of power. And that's the difference between the book and the way you come into the room when one turns on that gadget.
And if somebody says, why don't you stay that instead of this thing you are on television?
Yes, or vice versa, depending which is the real thing. If
I want to find someone to make that decision for me. We'll be right back after these words.
This book, Dick, I suppose, can be classified, and will in the libraries be classified, as a kind of autobiography. Now, there are various great autobiographies in the world. The autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini, autobiography of Hector Berlioz, The Education of Henry Adams. And that autobiography, in all of these cases, was the sole book that those particular people produced because they were eminent in other fields. Benvenuto Cellini, great artist, Berlioz, great composer, and so on. Now, do you feel this about yourself and your book, that this is the only thing you can do? Merely express yourself in a literate, witty, highly readable manner? Or are you now fired, and this I had in mind when I asked you that previous question about how you worked, have you now in mind the writing of another book?
No, I don't. I don't know what else I would do, but I felt at home writing, you're right. And there are times when I thought it really beats this business where, you know, you can sit in your own room and you can get it the way you want it and you don't have to worry about the lights and the not working or working. And
is there anything you'd like to write? Anything you want to write? Anything you have an ambition to write?
Well, I suppose everybody has the dilettante's desire to be able to write good fiction or a good novel, but they say most people want to have written, not to write. They they like the idea of having produced a book and having it sitting on the shelf, but to actually write is rough.
Particularly when everyone, Jerzy and I were talking about it, everyone thinks that if you write a book and it's a bestseller or someone's heard of it, that you're so rich. I literally have people sending me letters. We were talking about saying, would you mind lending me some money? And writers don't make that much money, and it's a very, very hard life.
They should write to Dick.
Right.
Where does the money go that people think authors make?
All right, suppose, take an example. An author gets $50,000 from a publisher, $50,000 from paperback sales. He's got to split his paperback sales with the publisher. He's got to give 10% to his agent and 50% to the Internal Revenue Service. And by the time you spread it out over 3 years, because most publishing houses are such one jump out of the bailiff, they don't have the money to pay you all off in one hunk anyhow, you're literally just making it. And you figure it took him 2 years to write a book, which some critic carelessly says was thrown together, and you spread $30,000 over 2 years to write a book, you're not exactly well paid.
May I give you this example? It's a British example. A writer called T.H. White, Tim White, we always called him, and Tim White was a hard-working writer. He probably worked for 30 years at this trade of writing, in a hut for the most part, on the Yorkshire moors with a couple of dogs, and if he made $1,000 a year, he was lucky. Now, he wrote a very fine series of books about King Arthur, which came out in a single volume called The Once and Future King. And the people who'd made My Fair Lady wanted to make a musical out of this, and indeed a musical was made. It was called Camelot, and it made a lot of money. And it meant that he got an advance of £80,000 for the use of his book. Now, he'd never seen so much money. £80,000 multiplied by 2.5, you get it in dollars. He'd never seen so much money in his life before. As soon as this money came in, the income tax people in England said, right, that's your year's earnings. We're going to tax you at the top rate. And the idea was to leave Tim with £2,000, which is, how many dollars? $1,000? No, $5,000.
$4,500 or so.
He said, this is the reward of 30 years of work. Spread this over 30 years, and it's still not very much. And he had to get out to the island of one of the Channel Islands, where he discovered there was no reciprocal tax arrangement with America. And that man who'd written the bestseller, and out of this bestseller came a great best-selling or lucrative musical, ended as a poor man lecturing in America to live, borrowing money from his friends, and eventually dying of a heart attack on the boat going home.
There is
from
no
America.
oil depletion allowance for writers.
That is depressing.
Typical example.
We have to take a pause while we think about that. I'm sorry. I'm uncomfortable more here talking about myself than I am in the writing, and I don't know what to make of that, and we're going to have to talk more about that, but think about it. But thank you all for being here, and good night, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.